Welcome to Charity Champions, the podcast where we bring real life stories from the not-for-profit sector into the spotlight. I'm your host, Emily Formby from Charity Recruit, and today I'm joined by Martin Drewry, Chief Executive from Health Poverty Action, a passionate advocate with over 2 decades of leadership experience in international development. Martin brings a distinct perspective to charity leadership, one shaped by political commitment, a deep insight into the sector, and a clear-eyed view of power, or often the lack of it. In this episode, we'll explore the myth of the powerful CEO, the realities of restricted funding, and why Martin believes the charity sector is inherently political. We'll also touch a little bit on imposter syndrome, avoiding stress pass-through, and what it means to lead with integrity when real control is out of your hands. If you've ever questioned your leadership choices, struggled with constraints, or wondered how much power you really hold in your role, then this one's definitely for you. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Martin Drewry. Hi, Martin. Great to see you.
Hi, Emily. Great to see you too.
Thanks very much for agreeing to come on. It's a pleasure to have you today. Let's start with the basics, I guess. Talk us through what a typical day looks like for the CEO of Health Poverty Action.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that one first. And there's no typical day, really. I mean, a hell of a lot of looking at the computer screen and answering emails, but it's and a lot of it isn't that enjoyable, But some of this stuff, the exciting stuff is. So it can be anything from you can be going to the House of Commons for meetings there, and sometimes you get a 15-minute thing where you feel, this is exciting. This is really making a difference, and then. A hell of a lot of time preparing papers for board meetings, which of course I love because I've got such fantastic trustees. But they say it's very variable. A lot of Zoom calls. We don't have a head office anymore.
Oh, so, okay. I didn't realise that.
So I'm in my bedroom. This is my typical. This is my daily office. So right. There's a lot of but we've got 300 staff worldwide. So it's. That's a strange dynamic, because a lot of the staff are in their own offices, but we're very decentralised international development organisation with 300 staff in about 15 countries. So they're, a lot of their daily life is very, very different to mine. So it's, it's very, very diverse.
Very diverse. So how did that all come about then that you got rid of head office? Was that off the back of COVID?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. It happened during COVID, and that was partly our lease was coming to an end, so we thought it'd be cheaper, save us a bit of money, and and then we'd be like first-time buyer, so we could negotiate where we wanted to go on our own terms. But then when we did it, one thing is for the international development sector, rightly, we're wanting to decolonise the way we work. So instead of having the old model of the UK-based head office and then programs in all the countries, to be more based where rooted in the program countries. Most
right.
are from the communities they work with. We're a very, very locally led organisation, so we made the decision. And also, it was pretty cost effective because it saved you the money rent from the head office, but also the salaries that we used to struggle to pay for London,
yes,
advertised worldwide, were much more competitive, and and you can give a job in the international development sector to somebody that doesn't have to move to London. Wherever they happen to be in the world, they could do it. So it helped with recruitment, and politically, in terms of ethos, it's the way it should be. Our centre of gravity shouldn't be in one of the most privileged countries of the world. So. We decided to continue with that, and we're also decentralising the board as well. So more board members. The last one was from Kenya, based in Kenya. So we're not really a UK-based NGO anymore. We're UK registered, and that's where we report to. But my successor could be anywhere in the world.
Yes. So the impact on your bottom line is obviously clear to see, I guess, from that point of view. But what about the impact across the organisation in terms of culture and, the impact? What's that meant by not getting together regularly?
Yeah, well, we never really did. That's the thing, because we were never most of our staff, at the biggest, we had about 500 staff, but only ever about a maximum of about 30 in the UK. So, Myanmar, we had 200. So it was, the centre of gravity was never in the UK. And because of the distances involved, most of the communication was by email or Zoom calls or, whatever, anyway. And
Yes.
if that's a large part of the organisation's culture, we found that even when we're in the head office together, because you're emailing everyone else, you also email the people that are in the same office as you.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I think for those of us that used to work in the head office, it's changed our daily life a lot. So for me, I hate writing. I like to talk, as you can tell. So that makes a difference. So we've had to look at different ways of trying to support each other. Once a month, those of us that are close enough to London go in and work next to each other in South Bank for a day, and those kind of things. Zoom coffees. Trying to look at other ways. But I think you can. I now, when I sometimes meet somebody face to face that I feel I know quite well, I find myself trying to remember, have I ever seen you physically before?
That is a true sign of the times, isn't it?
I know. I know. But you've got to be conscious of it. But
Yes.
I think it, and everyone's personal needs are different. So
Yes.
but I think organisationally, I think it can work fine.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. I know when we'd been speaking in our prep call prior to this, we talked about the assumptions of a CEO and how much people assume that because you're the CEO, you hold a lot of power throughout the organisation. And you did say to me that that wasn't always your experience. For the listeners, can you just talk us through that? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I can. It's such an interesting one. I mean, first of all, I would be lying if I said that I didn't have power of some kind, because the organisation now is broadly the kind of organisation I wanted it to be. It's pretty close. So I've obviously got some level of influence, but that everyone assumes that the CEO can make decisions and cause things to happen, and has got kind of pretty much absolute power. The staff assume it. External contractors, forever approaching me, cold calls on LinkedIn, as though I'm going to make a decision about the contracts, and I wouldn't. I wouldn't. So there's a lot different. And every organisation's different. So different CEOs in different types of organisation have got different types of power. So if we were an organisation that had a lot of unrestricted income, so by that unrestricted, I don't mean any quantity of it. I mean that we could spend it on whatever we chose to spend. Then, as a CEO, I could make strategic decisions.
Right.
Okay, we're going to make this a priority. We're going to allocate this % of our budget to this. And I could change things in that way. And I could choose to do that in a top-down way, or I could choose to do it in a consultative way. I could make choices about style of management and all that kind of thing. A lot of voluntary sector CEOs aren't in that position. Certainly for us, 99% of our income is from restricted project grants.
Right.
So we're applying to a donor saying, we want to do these activities over these years, will you fund us it? And then we fund the organisation from the 7% or so of that grant that they'll let us put towards our core costs. So we're, if I feel that we should change direction and say to start working on non-communicable diseases in Africa like cancer or mental health, that was something I really, really wanted us to work on. But I can't, or a new income stream, with all the cuts. Now we need to have new forms of income. But as a CEO, how do I make it happen? Because I haven't got a budget I can allocate to it. The staff are already overstretched. We've got to somehow absorb it in their existing workload. And so in a lot of ways, my background was in campaigning, and in a lot of ways, those same skills, how to influence people, to get people to want to do things, is the skills that I need to use to get things to happen in the organisation. And it's persuading people to be enthusiastic about things, to want to do things. You can't, if you haven't got the resources and the budgets to allocate to things, it's pointless setting a strategy and measuring KPIs and then holding people to account for those, because you'd have to have staff to monitor it. You'd have to have staff to go through all that process. You haven't got that. So it's about building a consensus and enthusiasm for it. And often, I think one of the things that I've found more and more is that, certainly in the type of organisation we are, we don't have many choices we can make, because we have to apply for the funding opportunities that come up. They might be to work on water and sanitation, they might be to work in particular countries, but we'll have to try and work within those constraints. Now, we then try to do it well, but you're not going to very often make the strategic choice to not apply. And because you haven't got free budget that you can allocate to what you choose, your choices are more about, well, we can do it well, we can do it, or we can do it badly, and my focus is more therefore on how to enable the staff to do it as well as possible.
So what's your strategy to do that? Because you've mentioned that twice. It's about building that enthusiasm and bringing the staff along with you. What's in your experience, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, well, in my experience in health poverty action, in the kinds of voluntary sector organisations I've worked from, which are always very bottom up, very grassroots, the culture of them doesn't expect managers to to tell them what to do. They're working for the cause, not for the manager.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is about being a support, being a coach in a lot of ways. I think so. I feel I don't want to make many decisions. It's very rare that. I think often as a manager, I've heard one senior person once say, "You've only got negative power." So I could stop people doing things, but to get somebody to do something we don't want to do is actually very hard to do, to get them to do it effectively, particularly the more senior they are. So I think a lot, if at the end of the day they know that I will absolutely express opinions and talk things through, and I'll have my opinions, I'll try to enthuse them about things, but usually I'll let them make the decision they want to make at the end of the day.
Right.
Then I then become a resource. They want to come to me, they want to ask my opinion, they want to engage me on things, because I support them in it. I might have good reflections, I'll give them honest opinions. If I'm going to be the decision maker, then if I was them, I would keep myself at arm's length. I wouldn't tell me the whole story. I'd pitch exactly what I want them to get me to say okay to, and I wouldn't know as much. And if at the end of the day they're closer to it all than I am, and there's, of course, as a CEO, particularly for a diverse organisation, if we're a really specialist organisation, say just worked on one specific thing, let's say like prostate cancer research, sure, I could become an expert in that. But for something like health poverty action, we're working in different cultures, different countries, huge range of different themes, from income, sort of livelihoods, immunisation, water and sanitation, climate change mitigation, so many things. Then I want the leadership needs to come from the people who are expert in it, not from me.
Right. And how does that translate when you've got the board at the other side? Obviously, you're reporting through to the board. So what does that look like?
Yeah. And again, I think that's one of my, I suppose, repeated messages to anyone that's either a CEO already or wanting to be, thinking about that, is to recognise that every organisation is different. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. And I think imposter syndrome, I think that's where that often comes from, because people hear about the ways other CEOs are working and say, oh, I'm not doing that. Maybe I'm not a proper CEO. And their approach would probably be the wrong one for your organisation. You've got to adapt to the organisation that you're in, and different CEOs have to do it in different ways. So I think it's very important to. I mean, one thing I try to do is to. I want people to know the full story. So if there's an organisational challenge, I want them to own it, and to feel, so like we haven't got enough money to get through the next year, for example. I want all the people to own it, all the staff, actually, if we can, as much as possible. I believe in sharing information as much as possible. And I think leadership comes from all parts of the organisation, but I don't want them to feel stressed by it.
Right.
I think that's the balance to try and strike. So to people know the full picture, and if we've got a challenge, like we just haven't got, we're not going to make ends meet this year, and that's going to cause us problems, obviously. Then want everyone on the case for trying to solve that and feeling ownership of it, but don't want it to see that as exciting and challenging and everything else, but not. There's a level of stress in which we need to have, and we'll support each other. But I don't want to pass on my stress.
How do you manage that then? Because that's a fine balance, isn't it?
It's a very fine balance. I think. Well, one thing I notice is that stress is greatest when you feel you can't do something about the issue.
Okay.
So if for me as a CEO, if we've got a particular challenge in a particular part of the organization's work, but there's not much I can personally do about it other than support the key managers who are doing, and have their back, and talk them through, and just be the best support I can, including emotionally. That's one of the big things, because they have really stressful work. So when they have a conversation with me, they need to come out of it feeling that some of the stress has been lifted, some of the burdens have been lifted. So I think it's trying to focus on that side of it, and with a level of honesty. But because I think that, but if people feel there's something they can do about it, I think that's much less stressful than feeling that there's a problem, but there's nothing I can do.
Right, I understand. Yeah. And is that something that you've learned over your career, or have you always had that approach?
That's a good question. I think I've always wanted to. I've never been one that's wanted to make top-down decisions.
Right.
And yet, in honesty, this is when I've been a middle manager as well, as a CEO. In honesty, though, the work has generally ended up the way I wanted it to be.
Because you're such a good influence, then.
I think, but it can take a long time. You see, I think because over time, you naturally try to seek out new people who have got the kind of working culture. So I think for me, it's really important that we have a warm, supportive, caring culture that treats people internally, according to the values we want to show in the world. And so, if over time you're deliberately trying to seek out managers to a point who've got a personality type and and a philosophy that fits that, then over time that changes the culture of the organization. You can't make it do it as a strategic decision. Our strategy is we're going to change our culture this year. And again, like strategies, managerial approaches. Some organizations can run in that paper-driven way. I'm not a fan of it, but you have to. If you're a very, very large bureaucracy, you have to do that to an extent. That doesn't work for us. We haven't got the time to be writing strategy papers on what we're going to do before we do it. The staff are too time poor for that. We've got to. The key things have got to be part of our culture and owned. So to try and keep things really bureaucratic light, minimal bureaucracy. If a task can be writing a paper up, doing a piece of admin can avoid it, and let people focus on the thing that's most important.
Do you think there's ever a place for a top-down strategy?
Such a good question. I think it can. You can do things that way, you can, and you can still be kind by it. It's really, you can still consult. You don't have to be a dictator. You don't have to shout and yell at people. I think, though, so but you need to have the resources to deliver it. So if you can only make strategic decisions about what it's in your power to control. And if you're not able to control what the budget that you have is spent on. You haven't got much power to make many strategic decisions directly. You can, within the limited range of choices that you've got, the kinds of approaches you could take, the kind of values you want to have. How radical are we going to be in our political advocacy, for example? Those kinds of things. But are we going to come out and criticize government, criticize corporations? Are we going to stay clear of that because they might give us money? Those kind of things you can influence. But if you have got an organisation that's got a large budget that you can choose as CEO how to spend it, then you could choose to work that way. But the question would be: is that philosophy in keeping with the values of civil society?
Right.
And I think a lot of people. I remember a couple of CEOs of large international development organisations talking about their experience, and each of them had said that the thing about staff in this type of organisation, you can ask them to do something. You can set it out very, very clearly, and they'll smile at you very nicely because they're all very nice people, but they won't do it. Their passion is for the cause. That's what they're working for. It's not. They're not servants of a CEO in the way that suddenly a corporation might be.
Yes, I understand that. It's interesting. I hear that a lot from candidates who are looking to move into the sector, have maybe done 12 to 18 months, and then it doesn't work for them, and they'll move back into the corporate world. And that's often the case.
Yeah.
But just circling back to the imposter syndrome side of things, talk us through your experience of that.
That one. Well, when I talk to other CEOs, so I'm trying not to believe I'm an imposter. So, but times I could risk it. Falling prey to that. If I talk to a lot of other CEOs, it sounds to me like, they're doing high-powered things. They've been. I remember a friend once saying to me, something about, how many health ministers in Africa, did you find that you feel that you identified with? And I've never met a health minister in Africa, and this was somebody that, despite being the CEO of an organisation that works in a lot of African countries, and I think some of them are much more hands-on with things than I am. Another close friend that manages a cancer research charity, who is very involved in, knows a lot about that specific cancer, and is able to do a lot of things hands-on. As I said, because the organisation I work on is so diverse, I can't be an expert in all those things, and in the areas that I am, I have to be fair to the manager who's leading that and give them the same level of freedom that the others have. So I think that can sometimes make me feel a bit of an imposter compared to others. But I don't think that approach, but it's not. Do I think I should be taking a different approach? Then no. I don't.
How do you manage it then when you get that feeling? What's your strategy if you were to give advice to a CEO who was perhaps feeling like that? What would it be?
I think to remember. I think maybe being a CEO more than anything else. There isn't one way of doing it. I know that's always true, but for a lot of jobs, if you're managing fundraising, you're managing communications or press relations, a lot of things, HR. There's some basic approaches. There's a lot of things that are of the norm. For being a CEO, I do think it can be totally different. You can have situations where you need to be the leader. You need to be the thought leader, making the big judgment calls, and that's you have to do it, because that's required. You're needed to be that. It could be that it's a much more decentralized organization, and the leadership comes in different places, and you'll get the best out of people if you give them the maximum power to be able to lead.
Yeah.
And then your supporter, you can have been a situation where your staff are totally on board with you and aligned with you, and then you can work together as a team, and it's great. And we're lucky in having that at the moment with Help Poverty Action. But I haven't always had it. It can be. When I first joined, I was brought in to try and change the direction of the organisation, and the staff didn't want to go in that direction, and neither did all but about two of the trustees.
Oh, really?
That was and there was no money to spend on any of it. So it was, that was a difficult, and it takes time. You've got to kind of gradually build consensus and upward managing the board as well. And and I've been in situations where I've had a hostile chair that was, wanting to take the organisation in different ways to half the board and all the stuff. But and now a really well aligned board and senior management team. And that's all. But in each of those different circumstances, all of which I've been in the same organisation, the way I've had to approach my work has had to be different. So, if you're a CEO, you're a CEO, and there's no imposters, and it's you've got pressures on you that some of which you can do something about, some of which you can't, and it's unique to you. You'll never feel an imposter.
It's interesting, isn't it, that pressure part of the role, because through conversations I've had with other leaders, you've got that pressure of all the staff, haven't you? They're all looking to you for answers. The board are all looking to you for answers. Yeah. Generally, the stakeholders across the organisation maybe, are looking to you for answers as well, and that can be a really lonely place, I think, sometimes, because who are you looking to? Who's your sounding board? And I think I always say to CEOs that talk to me about it is having that good network yourself, and having potentially a mentor or somebody that you can reach out to. Have you had that throughout your career?
Yes, I have, and I've had, I would say, throughout the career, looking back as well, before I was CEO, then I've always needed that and found that from different places. So I think there's no right or wrong place to get it from. Sometimes you can get it from colleagues, sometimes internal colleagues, sometimes you get it from external colleagues. If you're lucky, you can get it from your chair, and you trust people. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes. So I think wherever you find it, sometimes it's friends outside work. But I find that incredible. But I suppose coming back to your question about how to avoid passing on your stress, if you haven't got somewhere where you can go to recharge your own batteries and talk to someone about how rotten, how frustrating it is working with X, Y, and Z about your current situation, then it's going to be hard. So it's important to look for it in whatever way works best for you.
I think that support network is really critical, isn't it? And actually, I don't think that's unique to the charity sector or senior leadership, is it? I think a support network generally is really valuable, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, in life.
So over your career, you've obviously witnessed highs and lows within the sector. Yeah. What surprised you most over the years?
Well, quite how bad the world's gone in the last 2 or 3 years has surprised me. That I didn't. I think it'll turn. I think
that's positive. Good.
No, I do. This is the thing. I'm old enough. You're generous when you say 2 decades in the sector, because it's actually probably a bit more than that. But it's I've seen the times where the tide in politics has been going against us, and our role has been to try and resist that. Prepare for something different. That's what we're in now again. I've seen the times when it's been more going for us. The times when the international development sector certainly, was getting debt cancelled. For all the faults of the Blair Brown government, they did do some good things on cancelling poor countries' debts and international development, setting up the Department for International Development and so forth.
Right.
So we've had times when, you felt that you could, really, you could see your influence in power at the highest levels. I think, and the thing is, and I think that will change. Positive change almost always, the seeds of the movements and the forces that bring it almost always come from something times that are really hard. And those, I'm sure those things are being born now and will bear fruit. I think. I want you to say the thing will surprise me. The thing that came to my mind was actually in my days in a campaigning background. As I've said, while I've been working in charities, I've always felt I'm working in a political organisation. I think the issues that we work on, most of the charity sector, it can, you're sure you get some local ones that are doing charity provision, but usually it's about political issues. That ultimately the solutions are political, and it's your influence. But one of the I'd always felt as an activist, when I signed a petition or I sent up a letter to someone or anything else, I always felt I was a drop in the ocean.
Okay.
And that good thing to do, but it's national. You're just one of. When I became a national campaigns organizer, and I was the one sending out these actions, saying, "Please sign this postcard and send it to Tony Blair or to whatever." I realised it had vastly more impact than I ever imagined. And I think there's one organisation that did some research that showed that if 1,000 people go to listen to a speaker about an issue and they agree with the speaker, out of that 1,000, the number that will decide, and I'm going to do something about that, like maybe I'll write to my MP or something, I'll do something. It's only 1 in 10. It's only 10. Out of that 1,000, 100 decide they'll take that step. Out of that 100, how many get round to it?
Yes.
And it's 1.
Oh, really?
I know, there are different bits of research and different figures, but that was but the gist of it is always.
Yeah.
And so it always struck me that actually how big a deal it was every time you see somebody is actually doing, because not that many do. It's a bit different now. The numbers are different now in the age of collectivism and so forth. So the harder an act is, the fewer need to do it to make it politically effective. But you saw. I remember once it was when we were campaigning for debt cancellation, and the German government was blocking it, but they'd had their debt cancelled at the end of the Second World War. So we're saying, well, that's wrong. So we had to have a little postcard printed of the hand signing the cancelling of the German debt, and we got people to send it to the German government, and that caused the German head of state to burst into a meeting with Tony Blair and have a row with him about.
Oh no!
Yeah, and it was, and then the German finance minister later flew over to the UK to discuss it with us and so on. And that's all from, comparatively.
Yes.
So the impact that we have is much greater than I'd ever imagined in local activism.
And do you think charity should embrace that political role a bit more openly?
Yes. And I think it's really important for 2 reasons. I think one is that usually what we're doing as charity is it's needed because of a failure of the state.
Right.
And so if we just provide a service, then we can never answer it. We can create an impression that the issue has been dealt with, but we've never got the scale to answer it. But so by profiling our work, and this is what we're doing, it can make it look like the issue's been dealt with, and it takes away the political pressure to really get it dealt with for the majority. So I think it's really important that we use the fact that we're providing these services and have got some expertise on those areas to use the political voice that gives us in order to, because ultimately for the largest percentage of people, they can only be helped through political change. So it doesn't mean that you have to spend the bulk of your budget on it, but it absolutely, and you need to push, not be intimidated by the rules to try and prevent charities campaigning. I think that the people worry about that and self-censor way more than we need to. We should be pushing that to the very limit.
In what ways could you do that quite easily? And, because I can imagine a lot of listeners might be thinking, I haven't got the time to do that, or there's a cost associated with that we can't justify. What are the key things that you could do at low impact, but high impact, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I think it's hard to generalise because it depends on different issues. But I think it's always looking for where you can add value. So to give an example, Safe Health Poverty Action. One evening I was watching Question Time. It was
Thursday night.
Well, it was quite long, a while ago now, probably over 10 years. But it was, and they're having the debate about AIDS again, and so you got some people saying, charity begins at home. We should be spending the money here, and others saying, but we're a generous nation. Even though we're having a hard time, we should still support development in Africa and other places, but the whole dynamic was, I think the nature of the whole conversation, people get, I think understandably, when there is poverty and suffering here, do get more and more frustrated if they feel their country isn't listening to them and giving money away. And I understand that. But the whole dynamic would have changed, the political context would have changed if the information had been in the room that we're not giving to Africa. Our country takes far more from Africa each year than it gives back to aid. And the problem isn't that therefore we need to keep giving. We've been giving aid all these years and it still hasn't solved the problems. What's wrong with them? It's that we've continued to take more out than we've put back every year, and that's what the problem is. Through the tax dodging by corporations and the very debt repayments and various other things. But debt repayments date back to colonialism, so it's not their fault. So we just produced a report called Honest Accounts that just showed how much money was flowing to Africa from the rich nations and how much money was flowing from Africa to the rich nations, and showed that really it was Africa that was aiding them.
Right.
And so that was a simple, it got a lot of coverage. It gave people a lot of arguments to use and so forth. And it was useful. It's useful. That didn't cost a lot to do. It was, but it was just thinking, well, okay, with the resources that we've got, that's a contribution we could make. So I think it's about understanding the political context of the issue that you're working on as an organisation, and then looking for ways that you could add value with the opportunities you've got to what's already happening in a way that would make a difference. So networking with other organisations that are also advocating. And sometimes it can, like for the social development goals, the SDGs, Oxfam were campaigning for one of the goals to be around reducing inequality, because poverty is relative. And so were we. Now, we're a much smaller organisation than Oxfam International, but it was incredibly valuable that it wasn't just one organisation, because every time you went to a lobbying meeting, there were two voices, and the dynamic where one person said something and another said, "Yeah, I just want to echo what so and so said," totally changes the dynamic of the meeting. So it's just understanding the context, keeping informed, and looking for opportunities to make a difference, and then when you can. Be prepared to be radical and to say the truth, because it's again. One of the things that we campaign for is drug policy reform, and because if you look around the causes of poverty in the world, in a lot of countries, it's that because of drug prohibition globally, then that's put so much wealth and power into organised crime groups. There's a So the state's dysfunctional, corrupt governance, lots of conflict, unsafe areas where drug, gangs control, whole vast areas, and it's a big development issue.
Right.
Most people, development organisations know that, but there's a fear of speaking out about it because obviously, whether or not to legally regulate drugs is a very controversial issue.
Yes.
We did work on that, and I think for legal regulation of drug markets, and I think so that an organisation, I would say, we've gained a lot of respect for doing that, and sure, we haven't. I quite liked the Daily Mail had a because the profile would have, that Kofi Annan was going to come out and defend us if it did. We got that. But you can. I think there's more opportunity than a threat. As long as you're doing it with integrity and for the right reason, then you can defend it. And and if you do get to any controversy, usually you don't. It's hard to get media coverage, even if you're saying controversial things. But if you then. That's opportunity. You'll probably end up getting more funding from it rather than less.
What a great way to bring it to a close there, I think. I was just going to ask one final question, which was around any advice that you would offer to aspiring charity leaders who are struggling in the current climate. Just generally speaking, what would your top tips be? Look after yourself as well. I think the thing about love your neighbour as you love yourself. You got to do both. Yes.
Don't give yourself a hard time when you get it wrong. And struggle through in the context that you're in, knowing that if you're finding something hard, there'll be others, whether or not they're saying so. Others will be, finding those same things hard almost always. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And keep at it because we can't always control the outcomes, but we can control how much we try.
Yes, indeed. Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your experience. Honestly, it's been really a real pleasure to go through that with you this afternoon. And if you'd like to learn more about Health Poverty Action, where are they able to find you?
They can find us go to our website, Health Poverty Action, or we're on Blue Sky. We've stopped using Twitter. We're on Blue Sky.
Perfect. That's great. And obviously, if you're enjoying Charity Champions, please subscribe and share. It helps others in the sector find stories that will resonate with them. So until next time, thank you so much.